So we're starting with Rashida Richardson on the intersection of tech, policy, and civil rights. Take it away, Sierra.
Thank you. And we are still reading 2 paragraphs and passing it, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
But we'll start with Rashida's intro. Maybe I should do that. I'll do Rashida's intro and you take over the reading. Okay, so Rashida Richardson at the time was the director of policy research at AI Now Institute, Artificial Intelligence Now Institute, an interdisciplinary research institute based at NYU and focused on the social implications of artificial intelligence. Prior to her work with AI Now, she was legislative counsel at the New York Civil Liberties Union, the NYCLU, where she led the organization's work on privacy, technology, surveillance, and education issues. Rashida describes her work as being at the intersection of tech policy and civil rights. She explains how the uncritical use of data and technology can further entrench systemic inequalities and highlights the specific ways we can see this occur in the realm of education. The following text has been edited and condensed from an interview with Rashida. All right, Sierra.
Thank you. So she goes, my background is as a lawyer who worked primarily on civil rights issues, including school desegregation, specifically in New York State. I also previously worked on issues such as data privacy, student data privacy, and the intersection of education, tech privacy, and surveillance. At AI Now, I serve a dual role in that I do civil rights focused research, looking primarily at the government use of different types of data-driven technologies, trying to understand their current and perspective implication, and then designing and developing policy and interventions to address the problems we're seeing in our respective research. I can keep going.
I'm trying to. All right. I'm trying to use my background, having worked so many different civil rights issues and my form of structural analysis, to think about what we're seeing in the technology development pipeline, to see how it connects to the structural problems and harm that have existed in society, in order to fully understand the right entry points for intervention. Generally, a lot of the conversation in AI and tech policy is focused on privacy, or it looks at the problems facilitated by or derived from technologies as exclusively a tech problem, rather than seeing them as a socio-technical and an extrapolation of the structural problems that already exist. Why I came to AI Now and why I care about these issues, especially given my background, is that I don't think these technologies are presenting new problems. I think they are replicating a lot of historical and current problems, or even amplifying them in ways. So this work in AI/big data tech can provide an opportunity to force conversations around equity or force conversations around segregation in ways that there was no political or economic appetite for before. That's why I see looking at tech and specifically AI issues as an opportunity to intervene. I think one problem in education is that specifically because of research disparities in schools, tech becomes this band-aid to avoid the harder policy and social changes that need to happen.
Would anyone like to take over?
I can if no one, oh, sorry.
I was gonna say Claudia has stat, she puts stat in the chat.
Awesome, thanks, I can't see that, thank you.
Education is a space where I feel that often technology is adopted and implications and consequences are an afterthought. It doesn't start with a larger question of what do we think a fair and equitable education system looks like? One that has pluralistic learning and all the things that tons of research show are necessary. Then the second question should be, what is the role of technology in addressing and advancing that vision in addition to policy and other social changes? But that's not the way that tech works in education, generally, or in educational policy. It's usually put out into the world and said that it will solve the problem without even confirming that whatever problem has been identified is in fact the problem. So I do think that in education, using tech as a way to force fundamental changes is a little bit more challenging because of the way technology functions and how it's being seen as a solution. A lot of my research and policy work locally has focused on government use of what we call automated decision systems. That's really any type of big data technology that relies on government and private data or any type of main data source to either facilitate or advance government decisions making or policy implementation. I actually first started working on it in regard to school segregation when I was at the ACLU. There was this looming question about New York high school admissions and the extreme racial disparities in the specialized high schools. But there were also questions about the algorithm that was used to place students in schools and whether it was contributing to both racial and social economic disparities that are very prevalent in New York City schools. Then on the flip side, there was a guy, Michael Alvis, who has pushed what's called the adjust for school district's interests. So if a school district wants to have more racial equity across its schools or social economic equity, then it can adjust the rankings and assignment of students to try to advance that goal. And there was also a question in my research of talking to different practitioners and researchers about whether the controlled choice model would work.
Mona Hashtag.
Sorry, one sec, let me get my bearings here. The last issue I worked on at the ACLU before coming to the AI, now was around the first school district in the country to use facial recognition in Lockport, New York. New York State has a bond act that provides funding technologies in schools. Most other school districts use this state funding for instructional or educational technologies, or to upgrade really aged systems or software that the school needed. But Lockport turned to one small provision that allowed the funding to be used for security reasons. I don't think the legislature anticipated that the funding would be used for facial recognition, more like CCTV cameras, metal detectors, and stuff that's already in schools. It was also kind of astonishing that no one in the state government was actually tracking how much that money was used. And that, hold on a second. And that no one in the state government was actually tracking, and that it took a reaction and advocacy to draw attention to the fact that school districts could exploit the funding in this way. Lockport wasn't even aware of all the news media pointing out the racial and gender disparities with facial recognition. And it's a district that already had issues with racial disparity in school discipline practices. Black students and mixed race students were likely to experience more extreme and more frequent discipline. There seemed to be a complete lack of understanding in how that pre-existing issue could be worsened by the application of racial bias technology. That is more likely to misidentify students of color. But I see another equity issue arising in schools that are less diverse, in that students of color, students with disabilities, any type of marginalized student are more likely to have a negative experience with the technology because it's not built for them or with them in mind, and can experience negative educational outcomes or just have a more negative education experience as a result of the colorblind policy implementation of these technologies. I can pass it off to another.
But that doesn't mean I don't have hope that there are ways to use the conversation around how technology exists in schools, or even how it has become so prevalent in schools, to force conversations around the more uncomfortable issues of the long-term consequences of resource hoarding or other things that people see as personal choices, but that are inherently political. If we know we're too far along and there's no way to reverse our dependence and reliance, reliance on big data in society, then how can we use this data or even more advanced applications of technology like machine learning that can look for patterns to legitimize problems we all know exist and therefore help advocacy that is striving for educational equity? So many institutional actors are asking for evidence-based policy or metrics to support disparate impact claims. If that is the logical approach to seeing problems that they have, then how can we use this data or data-driven technologies to help legitimize advocacy that needs to happen, or at least legitimize the harms and complaints that exist? In our current moment with remote schooling, I think the most obvious issues of resource inequality, economic inequality, and the digital divide have been exasperated. I know that attendance and and participation in remote classes is completely down. A lot of students' main form of internet is through a phone. So what does it mean when that phone is a whole family's main source of internet?
And Sabelo has staff.
Okay. My fear is that there will continue to be colorblind, class-bound blind, power-blind policies put into place that don't appreciate the varied experiences of students. And by failing to acknowledge that difference, will be more likely to leave those who really were underserved and did experience harm in this period in a worse place than others. I just hope that the extreme policy decisions, business decisions, and other social decisions that are being made to address this crisis serve as some sort of evidence to force conversations around fundamental changes in society. Okay, scrolling down.
That's it.
Oh, that's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
1,000 words. We somehow got
Cool.
your conversations into 1,000 words. Thank you so much, everyone. So let's pause just for a few minutes. We started late and I apologize for that. And we want to transition into David J. Harris's 1,000-word chapter.